There is a kind of guilt that only people who are genuinely growing ever feel. It doesn't come from doing something wrong. It comes from becoming something different, from noticing that the values you once held no longer fit the way they used to, from realizing that the friendships that once felt like home now feel like a language you are slowly forgetting how to speak, from wanting things that the old version of you would not have recognized. It is the guilt of change itself, and for some people, it is heavy enough to stop the whole process entirely. Harrison carried that guilt for years, and it almost cost him everything he was becoming. He had grown up in a tight, loyal, working-class community where sameness was a form of love, where staying close meant staying similar, where the highest compliment you could pay someone was that they hadn't changed, that success and time and experience hadn't made them different, hadn't lifted them out of the circle, hadn't turned them into someone unfamiliar. Harrison had grown up believing that deeply. It was woven into how he understood loyalty, identity, and what it meant to be a good person. And then Harrison started changing. Not because he planned to, not because he decided one day to become someone new, but because life, the books he read, the experiences he accumulated, the failures that cracked him open and the growth that filled those cracks, was quietly reshaping him whether he consented to it or not. His values shifted first. Things that had once seemed fixed and obvious began to feel more complicated, more textured, more open to question. His ambitions changed shape. The things he wanted to talk about, think about, spend his time on, all of it was moving in a direction that didn't always map neatly onto the world he had come from. And every time Harrison noticed the distance growing between who he was becoming and who everyone around him remembered him being, the guilt arrived right on schedule. He started managing it the only way he knew how, by suppressing the new Harrison whenever the old world was watching. He would shrink his vocabulary in certain company, laugh at jokes he had quietly outgrown, nod along to conversations he privately disagreed with. He became a man who lived in two registers, fully himself in private, carefully edited in public, and the exhaustion of that performance was immense. The slow burn started on a phone call with his oldest friend. They had been close since childhood, 2 decades of shared history, real love, genuine loyalty. But somewhere in the middle of the conversation, Harrison realized with a sudden clarity that they were talking entirely about the past. Every story, every reference point, every laugh, all of it was backwards facing. And when Harrison tried to bring something current into the conversation, something about where he was now and what he was thinking about, it landed in silence and was quickly redirected towards safer, more familiar ground. Harrison hung up the phone and sat with a feeling he couldn't immediately name. It took him a few days to find the word for it. The word was grief. He was grieving not the friendship exactly, but the version of himself that had fit so naturally inside it. The Harrison who hadn't yet become inconvenient to be. That grief opened something up. Because grief, when you let it move through you honestly, has a way of clarifying things. And what became clear to Harrison, slowly, over weeks of sitting with it, was that he had been operating under a belief he had never consciously examined. The belief that changing meant betraying, that growing meant abandoning, that the people and places and versions of yourself you left behind were somehow diminished by your leaving. He was reading an old collection of letters one evening, a gift from a mentor he deeply respected, when he came across a line that rearranged his thinking entirely. The writer, reflecting on his own life, had written that a river does not betray its source by moving forward. It carries the source within it always. It simply cannot stay still and remain a river. Harrison read that line 4 times. He was not betraying where he came from by growing beyond it. He was not dishonoring his roots by developing new ones. He was not a lesser version of himself for wanting different things than the boy who had grown up in that tight, loyal circle. He was the same person, moving forward, carrying everything that had shaped him while refusing to be imprisoned by it. That distinction between carrying your past and being confined by it changed how Harrison held his own evolution. The guilt didn't vanish overnight, but it loosened its grip, and Harrison stopped editing himself in half. He stopped performing the old version for an audience that deserved to meet the real one. Some relationships contracted as a result. A few disappeared entirely. But the ones that remained deepened in ways Harrison hadn't thought possible, because real connection, he discovered, requires real people, not curated ones. Here is what Harrison's story is really saying and what yours might need to hear today. Changing is not a character flaw. Evolving is not disloyalty. Outgrowing is not abandonment. These are not things that happen to people who have lost their way. These are things that happen to people who are fully, courageously, honestly alive. You were never supposed to stay the same. Not at 20 and certainly not beyond it. The people, the beliefs, the versions of yourself that shaped you, they did their job. Honor them by becoming everything they were building toward. A river doesn't betray its source by moving forward. Neither do you. If this story moved you, subscribe and share it with someone who needs to hear it today.